So, welcome to this next episode of For Your Imagination. It's a sports themed one this time. We're talking about the question of fandom and looking at authenticity, fan culture, and how brands can work with fans and with sports properties to create win wins. Really great conversation. We had Tom Washington from Genius Sports and footballing journalist Seb White. Conversation ranging from fan cultures, how fan culture is growing around the globe. We looked at technology and sport, what's changing, what's possible, what are some great examples of how brands are using it, and what are some bad examples and things to avoid. And we even dived into niche sports and emerging trends and where sponsors might be looking for what's coming next. So I do hope you enjoy it. It's a great conversation. Okay, so here we are in the lab at Imagination. We are recording this just before the Football World Cup kicks off. And I'm really pleased to be joined by two people from the world of sports, from two different sides of the world of sports. We've got Tom Washington, Group Marketing Director from Genius Sports, and Seb White, a football journalist, a co-founder of Mundial magazine, and a former director of Hampton and Richmond Football Club. So involved at various levels of the game. And I think, looking forward to a great conversation about fandom and sports and sponsorship and where the opportunities are. So why don't we get straight into it? Fans versus audiences. Is there a difference? What's the difference? Well, start with you, Tim.
Yeah, I think fans obviously originally were just those ones inside the stadium, weren't they? Those are the ones that were attending week in, week out, and then the fans, sort of the exiles that could absorb their sport, or certainly in football senses, could absorb it remotely, or had to fight really hard to absorb it, But nowadays, obviously, with the internet and amazing marketing from the Premier League and things like that, that audience is all around the world. The fans are still outside the stadium, and they're a huge part of the product of what the Premier League have marketed so well. And they do provide a service, and they're performing off the pitch as well as the players on it. So I do think the fans are increasingly important to the product that's being shown to the audiences all around the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, fans are very much the lifeblood, and should continue to be so as well.
I couldn't agree more with that. I think that's a really good way to put it. I think that we're going to get into this in lots more detail, but the nature of a fan, what constitutes a fan, their behavior, how they consume sport is evolving beyond recognition at the moment. And I think that presents a ton of challenges for anyone trying to monetize that fan. Audiences at scale, if we're talking about the term audiences, is not, it's not gone. Like, sports is still the sort of last remaining monoculture where everyone is watching the same thing at the same time, but how it's consumed is very different. So the idea of a mass audience behaving in the same way, certainly outside the stadium, is very different. And so the focus is much more on the individual fan and what they are and how they behave. So I think we'll get into it, but I think there's a really interesting kind of evolution there across those two things.
Yeah. And what marks a fan out versus audience? I mean, would a fan look at the audience and think they're distinctly different?
I think
What makes a fan?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a bit too simple to go, if you're in the stadium, you're a fan, and if you're outside, you're part of the audience, so to speak, because for different reasons, those people the Arsenal fans in Nairobi, they are fans of their football club as much. They just do it and consume it in a different way. So there is a difference, and increasingly there's becoming more of a tension now as well, obviously, in terms of commercialization of the game, in terms of how the game is presented and how other people consume it and record content. It's very different between what the fan thinks the football is and what the audience, who aren't necessarily inside the stadium. And it is too simple to perhaps say it's either one or the other, but there's a real delicate balance between the two. And I think that's one of the things that brands, clubs themselves struggle to sort of maintain, because it can get, obviously, we know football is one of the most passionate sports in the world, and football fans are the most loyal and passionate people, and they can get very particular about these things.
I think it's also, to that point, is why sports leagues, teams are trying to, some of them anyway, are trying to become more of an entertainment brand, and or as much as they are a sports brand. Wrexham is a really good example. So they have a core set of fans, but they want a broad audience. How do you do that? You create an entertainment model. We'll get into this as well, but the American model creates an enormous audience. Super Bowl, halftime show. Like, are they all fans? Are they all hardcore fans watching that? Absolutely not. But it's a way of engaging and therefore monetizing a broader
Further.
subset. So yeah.
Well, let's dig into that. I mean, what's the right way to go about that? If presumably that's what you want to do as a sports brand, is kind of grow the brand. Is there a right way and a wrong way?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I would say. I think firstly, you do have to remember, and increasingly so, you have to remember that those fans have to be kept sweet is probably not the right way of saying it, but you have to understand that those are part of the product. Is probably what I mentioned before. Those fans inside the stadium are part of what makes football so good. What makes that particular club, so good. Whether it's the fans on the Kop, whether it's the fans in Selhurst Park, a club that's probably emerging and turning into this European bigger club in Europe. So I think you've got to understand that those people matter, and then the people from the outside, they do matter, and they consume it in a very different way. So you've got to make sure that you link those two things and show the community, because essentially the fans inside the stadium have created this amazing community between them and the players, between them and what happens on the pitch. If you can recreate that community online, screenings, events, through so many different ways of fandom, then I think that's the sweet spot. I think if you can make sure that they feel part of the community, once those two different entities, the fans and the audience, are almost so different and so almost at loggerheads sometimes. And there are tensions now in modern football of fans and between tourists that turn up to stadiums and things like that. There is a real tension, and fans are getting priced out to a point. But it is, yeah, I think you've got to make sure you maintain that balance. And it's a difficult balance because, again, as I said, football fans are incredibly passionate.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things we found when we did some research around the previous World Cup, talking to fans and trying to understand what the experience of being a fan is how seriously they take the idea of participation. And there's a real sense that they have a role to play in the stadium and in the game. And that idea of participation, I suppose, is one of the things that you're trying to tap into, is to not compromise it, but give them more opportunities to do it, perhaps, or bring more people along.
Yeah, I think what you said is absolutely right in terms of that balance. If you think back 5 years ago, for some reason, I was seeing lots of clips of excuse me, games that were played during COVID at the moment, and it's awful to watch. There's no atmosphere. At the time, it was like, great, football's back on. Let's watch a game. But looking back, it was awful. It must have been awful for the players. Certainly awful for the fans who couldn't make it in. And as a viewer, it was so much less compelling to watch. So the if we need a stark example of why fans are important, that gives us to it, gives it to us. And I think that the point around that, the community building, the authenticity, is a fine line, and that balance is the right point there. I think that we don't, certainly there's a cultural difference between the way fans engage here and a market like the US, for example. There are certainly lessons that we can take from that in order to grow sports and to grow engagement and grow audiences, that we've spoken about. But there needs to be a real understanding of what the fan really cares about, what they want. So you're not alienating them. So you're not, becoming something that they don't want to support anymore.
Any examples of brands or initiatives that have got it wrong that spring to mind?
Well, I don't throw anyone under the bus, but I think, I think that you have to retain what fans love about following a team, whether that's or following a sport, whether that's online or whether that's in the stadium. I think that there are certain elements that certain clubs are trying to bring into the game that have jarred fans. I mean, talk about Arsenal fans have fallen in love with it now, but the song that was created, to sort of give them that moment at the start of games, they've adopted that as their own. That's a success. I think there's been other examples of in stadia activities that have jarred with fans. And then I think that, like, brands have a huge role to play in this. They're financing a lot of this opportunity, and to give one specific example, during the Six Nations, there was a new advertising technology during the broadcast which used breaks in play to show adverts, and it sort of stopped the play and it came out of the atmosphere of the stadium and showed an advert. So when a scrum was awarded, the fan was no longer kind of in the moment. Okay, not lots happening, but they were hearing a jingle or hearing a message from an advertiser and so on. And I think that's an example of where the backlash was quite severe, certainly online. It probably won't stop them doing it because it's a great way of monetizing that broadcast asset. But that's a good example of where perhaps they're trying a bit too hard for an audience that isn't receptive to it.
And I suppose when you get it wrong, because of the how passionately fans feel about it, they'll feel exceptionally passionately furious
because
about
they
what you
feel like
did.
they own that's their thing. They own it.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's the same with the football club.
Well, yeah, and I think probably a good example, not necessarily a brand-specific example, but I mean, arguably so because we're talking about Arsenal here, but tifos are a very important way of fans expressing their emotions all around the world.
So tifo, what's a tifo?
So a tifo, a display, loads of flags, banners, particularly large-scale banners, essentially, and some of them are incredible, and some of them look amazing.
To take over the whole stand.
Yes, essentially, yeah. And there's even some around the world in South America that have taken over the whole stadium. Like, it's incredible to see, and they look amazing. And of course, it looks amazing to the audience. It looks amazing online.
It's good TV.
Yeah, it's good. It's good TV as well. But then Arsenal, by the way, who do so many things right, I would say, certainly their collaboration with Adidas in recent times have just made them a very specific club, and dare I say, cool. I know that will annoy some people because that puts people off about Arsenal, that they are this trendy, fashionable club, but they've done it extremely well. Anyway, Arsenal did a tifo before a game once, early on in this season, and it was essentially just a big red drape with the outline of the badge on. And it was the antithesis of tifos, which are all about creativity, personality, and it got ridiculed on social media, not just by Arsenal fans, but around the world. Arsenal fans realised they'd made a mistake there, Arsenal, the club, realised they'd made a mistake there, and then all across the rest of this season, of this huge, impactful season for Arsenal, this season where tension was. You could feel it coming through the TV, couldn't you, when Arsenal were playing? It was like, they so wanted to do it. But before each game, pretty much most of the big games, for sure, the North London derby, they had properly produced tifos done by Arsenal fans, illustrated brilliantly. They looked brilliant. And that was a moment where clubs or brands can see that you can support these great things that not only will do you well from a brand perspective, but also you're enhancing the product that you're trying to amplify and trying to make better. And they even reproduced it the other day on the tour. They hung up one of the tifos on where the buses were going past, and that's when you can get it right. That's when you can tap into the real nuances of fan culture, but get it right.
Yeah, and I guess add to the story, add to the mythology.
Absolutely, yeah.
Weave yourself in. Okay, so let's switch now into technology, because one of the things I find interesting about sports is that it feels anchored in history a lot of the time, but really most sports are fans of novelty. Constant rule changes, little tweaks here, innovations in the format. If you think about cricket, 2020, or baseball, home run derbies. With technology has obviously driven a ton of change inside sport, both in the experience for fans, but also in the product itself. So what, from a Genius point of view, or, as somebody who works day to day in the sector, what's possible now? Like, what are you seeing?
Yeah, the short answer is a lot. A lot is possible. I think before you start going down that road, you have to ask the question of what is technology's role within sports. We very much take a view that it has to enhance it. It has to make sports better. We've got this cultural phenomenon that's a huge part of our lives that we all love. We all already think is perfect. Technology has to make it even better. And there's no shortage of innovations, as you say. A lot of it's subjective. There's the ref cam is a great example. Like for me, like I can live without ref cam. It doesn't kind of appeal to me, but some people love it. At Genius, the sort of things that we are building and enabling is through sports data. So sports data, traditionally think about that as, you know, a set of statistics that's evolved hugely into things like expected goal and really, really detailed analysis of everything that happens in a game. The transition now is sports data becoming something entirely different. Sports data is becoming really something that's powering the digitization of sports. So rather than a set of statistics, it's tens of thousands of data points being captured X amount of times per second on every single player, every ball, every referee, which effectively enables us to create a 3D digital twin of the game in real time.
Right.
And once you have that, once you can render that out, the opportunities are almost endless. So so we use that to power things like semi-automated offsides,
Right.
because you can see the game from any angle with the maximum precision that you need to be able to make those calls. So we do that with the Premier League and various other leagues around the world. It's also something that teams use for analysis. So it allows you to see the game from any angle. You can see why, you know, from a player's point of view, why did they make that pass? You know, like how they positioned on the pitch in any given moment. And then from a sort of fan experience perspective, you know, the future is, we don't quite know what the future is going to look like. But when you have those ingredients of being able to manipulate the game in any way, turn the game into something completely different, we're already seeing examples of that, where in real time the game is being rendered into cartoon characters, or you know, renders of football games. So it's like you're watching a PlayStation game, but it's the real game. The possibilities are actually endless there. So what that develops into and what fans respond to and how that's monetized, we will see. But the underlying technology, to answer your question, anything is possible at this stage. So it's a really exciting time for I think for analysis and ultimately fan engagement and how fans experience the game.
Yeah, experience and enjoy the game.
Exactly. Yeah.
So technology has made the fan experience better.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to get into VAR at this, and I think what you said there about enhancing is definitely the key thing. And I think if we're talking about the whole fan audience debate, when you go to a game, you have a very specific point of view. You have a very you see. It's one of the things I always used to say. You have to go to a match to really get a sense of a player. For example, this is going back to whenever. I remember people used to always say that Roy Keane was this amazing midfielder, right? And I would look on TV and you're shown a very specific view, and sometimes you won't even see him because he'll be off camera. So I think what you're saying there about like replicating pitches and things like that that will allow the audience, from wherever they're watching it, it will allow them to experience the game so much better, and that's a good thing. Technology can have its issues with VAR and things like that. We've seen that, but that's genuinely a good thing. So it brings the real joy, and the stats as well do that to a point. And again, there'll be a lot of people, and certainly traditionalists, that will go, the only stat that matters is the one in the top left-hand corner. But it's genuinely interesting. And again, I said this as someone who's probably a bit of a traditionalist. It's genuinely interesting after games or during games to know what is actually happening. I mean, for years, certainly I grew up on watching football with co-commentary that was not adding anything to you. It was just almost like telling you what was happening in the stands, which you could hear anyway. So I do enjoy that, and I do like knowing more about the game. There's obviously a limit. There's certainly a limit to stats and things like that, but it changes the way that games even happen inside stadiums. I was at the Liverpool-Brentford game the other week, and they're talking about technology and stats and numbers. Everyone, in the old days, it might have been a lone bloke at the front of the ground with a transistor radio going, this so-and-so scored, and there'll be all these terrible things that happen where the wrong score has been announced. But everyone around me had an update on a FOTMOB or something like that, and would turn around and go, Chelsea are losing, this is happening, which then meant Brentford had a better chance of qualifying for Europe. But then that changes the atmosphere inside the stadium, because the tension amongst the away end was not that we've just got to win this and see what happens. No, we really need to win this now, because actually it's all going for us. And people become more tense, more irritable, more excited. It changes the experience inside the stadium. Now, whether that's a good or bad thing is immaterial, I think, because I think the fact we're not going to get the genies out of the bottle in terms of like later scores and things like that. And again, I think it's a great thing, that we know exactly what's happening. There was a famous case of Man City years ago who essentially got relegated because someone had told them that the result was going a different way. that would never happen now. Of course it wouldn't. But I do think that technology gets a bit of a bad reputation in terms of that. But it does add, and we're all there at half time in between the pints and the burgers, looking at what Sky Sports have said or what someone's just sent on the text message. That was definitely an offside. You go out to the second half and you're a little bit like, the referee's done us there. We need to. So it plays a real role, a living role inside what actually happens.
Yeah. And I suppose, fandom is about stories, it's about rivalries, it's about arguments and insights, and this level of analysis kind of just gives more grist to the mill.
I think that's right. And it extends the storytelling that you're talking about, because there's so many different layers of analysis, and you give 5 different analysts 5 different bits of information on a certain game. You've got multiple stories and multiple audiences, each of those wanting to get a different thing from the game or thing from the analysis. So it's I agree that there's a limit and there's a time and a place for it, but it is also a huge engagement tool for the sports.
That brings us to, I guess, this broader idea of sport as an entertainment product. So it really has shifted out of Saturday afternoon in the stadium to something I can consume almost all the time on any channel.
Sometimes do.
Sometimes on multiple channels. But to me, the US is where it has really led sport as entertainment, the product inside the stadium, and then what happens around it. Having experienced some live sport in the US, it is quite a phenomenal experience inside the stadium. The amount of additional fun stuff that's put on for the crowd, but also the amount of branding that happens. Do you feel that's obviously very different to the European model of sports? Do you think this is the direction it's going in? What does that level of investment do for a sport and for fans, and what's the tension?
What you touched on there about the Six Nations and how things become impacting on our whole experience, and that can happen in the grounds as well. We've all heard, this free kick is sponsored by so and so, or this extra time is sponsored by so and so, and that's quite often like local businesses and things like that. But there is a real, again, I think it's the balance to be had. If they did something like that in football, I imagine you'd have the same reaction with what they did in the Six Nations. People aren't going to take that. People are already talking about, for a long time, there's been talk of football being quarters, and that's come from the American side of things. That is going to happen sort of by proxy in this World Cup because of and rightly so, for player safety, because of the high temperatures and the cooling breaks. But there are already people that are going, I'm not sure about that. And I do think, again, there's that balance to be had. Let's not get too much in. Football fans are realistic. We understand that the sponsorships and the money that comes into the game, whether that's through brands, whether that's through activations, whether that's advertising, whether that's through American owners. We understand that these things are happening and they will make things better. Wrexham is an incredible example, incredibly well done. Many unique factors to it, but it's an amazing investment and an amazing improvement in the game. So again, it just goes back to that balance. Let's not do too much.
Well, can you put your finger on it? You said Wrexham did it really well. What are the key things that they did, which is, a signal of how to do it well versus not?
I think straight from the off, they were authentic about what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do it. They involved the community. I mean, they picked a brilliant club for that because there was obviously an existing community, historically famous, the oldest football international ground in the world. But straight away, they went for the community. And however they presented that, whether that was in the documentary series, but whether that was in initiatives, whether that was what we're going to do, where we're going to even little things, like I say little things, but changing, rebuilding that stand behind the goal to make sure that more fans could, because it was derelict. That is the key thing for what they've done, in my opinion, and community, authenticity, commitment as well. I think, we've heard lots of people come in with big plans and big ideas, deep pockets sometimes, and they've never quite put it to the test. And I think Wrexham, for different reasons, there's a great background, but we are talking about A-list Hollywood celebrities who are also very good at business. So there are a lot of unique factors, but what they've done, and consistency and community all the time, everyone, they don't just stop doing it. And it never felt that when they did it at the start that it was inauthentic. It always felt that they genuinely had a passion for it. And that has obviously snowballed to where they are now.
it's hard not to look at Wrexham now, and obviously it always makes sense looking backwards, but it's hard not to look at it and think one of their big filters when had this crazy idea was what's going to make the best story.
Mm.
Like where is the narrative of this thing that I want to do? And as you say, they found those storytelling elements.
Yeah.
The town, the fans, the ground, the history.
Yeah.
It's okay, so let's get into sponsorship then. Okay. As you say, it's necessary, I think. Generally, sports expensive. We need these partnerships. I think most people would agree now. We've moved past the stage of it's good enough just like slap a logo on the jersey. So, what makes good sponsors? What makes good sponsorship? Is it this idea of fit? How do you think about finding the right fit in terms of sponsorship?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is anyone who can afford to get into sports as a vehicle to grow their brand, where the business is doing it right now. We're in a moment where advertising around sports and sponsorship is booming, like absolutely booming. The streaming companies, whether it's through documentary storytelling or live sports and going after rights, the money that's being spent there is massive. We're at this moment where sport is having its heyday, if it hasn't always been in its heyday. And I think that the nature of that shift from being to an entertainment business is really important as well. And the US, to sort of come back to that point before I get onto the sponsorship, is I think that is inevitable because it grows the audience, it grows the addressable audience, and it grows the engagement. So I don't think that stuff is going to slow down. I think the shift to becoming an entertainment business is already happening. That's bringing in the sponsors, and I think that there are loads and loads of great examples of really good sports sponsorship and where it's worked well. I think sensible brands do their due diligence and understand the audience in lots and lots of detail and try not to make those mistakes that we've sort of touched on. The what does good look like? I think something like a Red Bull in terms of its involvement in sports is almost like best practice.
What do they do well?
Red Bull doesn't feel like a sponsor. It puts on events. It sort of owns this sort of adrenaline sports culture. It puts on events. It grows community. Often the events are free. That invites these sorts of communities to. It's got into owning sports clubs, and so it's using sports as a vehicle to grow its brand as a sponsor. But to me, it doesn't feel like one. It feels ingrained into those worlds. So I think like that's probably a kind of level where most sports sponsors, if they can afford to, want to get to, but it's very hard to do. It takes a long time to sort of build that equity. So, but yeah, there are other examples of where it doesn't feel authentic and it feels like it's just slapping a logo on a sports property or something. And I think, you notice it when you see it. I think, Phil, what you think, Zeb?
Yeah, definitely. And I think mentioning there about sport being in a great place as well. And I can only speak probably more about football, but we've seen the rise of gambling sponsors in football, and that's obviously going to come to an end, certainly in England for a bit. But it'd be interesting to see what happens because I've done a lot of work in sort of the retro football shirt space, and sponsors in the retro football shirt space it's just so iconic. Like if I see something with Sharp on it, I go back to Man United in 1980. If I see something with JVC, I kind of feel like that's been diluted a little bit from the raft of different sponsorships, not just gambling, by the way, but just a lot of different sponsors. And quite often these are short term as well. Sharp were a massive part of Man United for, I think it was nearly a decade, wasn't it? Same with JVC. So I do understand why these things are slightly different, but I think the opportunities that you can have in football, yes, you can have the logo on your shirt, but I think it's capturing that community. It's reinvesting in that community. And again, TIFOs I was talking about earlier on, but supporting supporters or fans inside the ground, outside the ground, that audience. There's so many ways now that can be seen. It's not just a logo on the front of the shirt, isn't it? And a great, when working for Mundial and working with brands and working, some of the best videos we saw were just natural, authentic, dare I say wholesome, but connected and really connected, because football has that community feel. It means so much to people. And if you can replicate that as well as an advertiser or be part of that, then that means so much more than just going bang or free, these free or giveaways or just a board in the stadium or training kit sponsor. I mean, brands get so many opportunities now with not just a shirt sponsor, is it? It's partners within football clubs, the official partner of this, the official partner of that. And they get so many opportunities with players. You know, this is your sponsor day, or this is sponsor day, and you get 3 hours with X amount of players, Premier League players. My daughter's experienced some amazing things at Brentford through like sponsors. And those are things that would really change things and really have a legacy than just the logo on the shirt, essentially. And I think that's a key thing for any brand wanting to get into sport. There's make the most of your opportunities and not just go, oh, we've got a sponsor day, or should we just give these free tickets to XYZ? No, invest in it.
Think about this.
Do your due diligence. Know what exactly works at that football club, because every club is different.
I suppose there's also this huge opportunity because fan-created content is just growing exponentially. And even live, as you say, you know, these things are happening in the game. So perhaps that's a way that sponsors, maybe it's a measure of if the sponsorship is working, is if fans start to adopt that into the story or creating the content around it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the dream. It comes down, I think you can pay for the sponsorship, which is normally quite expensive, particularly if you're an official sponsor of a sports property. And that comes with its benefits, because if you're a company at scale, you get the credibility, the trust, and everything that comes through. But then there's a whole other strategy and a whole other bucket of budget to go away and activate it, and that's where creativity comes in, and community. I think the creativity part is you know, you see some companies do it brilliantly. You see other companies that get access to players, and every YouTube video looks the same. It's like, oh, we've got, you know, these players to shoot from the halfway line. It's like, I have no idea what your brand is. You're just, you know, it's really kind of boilerplate type approach. So the creativity is really, really important. And that's where you can capture the imagination of fans. And it doesn't matter whether you're big or small. Like some of the best stuff out there at the moment is the huge B2B companies doing sponsorships. It's AWS, it's Salesforce, who are doing really interesting things with F1 and other sports. So it's, you know, it's horses for courses, but you have to activate it properly. You have to understand what the fans want, and I think that creativity part is huge.
And it connects to fan culture as well, because that is a thing, isn't it? Fan culture, and different sports teams have got different cultures that fans are creating, right, and playing inside those cultures.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the same thing happens on that pitch. There's 11 players versus 11 players, but every club will have its own intricacies. And again, probably go to Arsenal. It's got that cool, fashionable following. You know, the Liverpool, the hardcore, the ones that are singing. Man United, the history, the relevance. Everyone has got all these different things, and all the fans have got that amazing ability to sort of differentiate themselves, whether that's visually or whether that's like emotionally, and especially on social media now. You know, we can go back and forth and debate, you know, who's the best at this, who does that. And again, football fans love nothing more than one-upmanship. But
and we're seeing these cultures getting exported. You talked about, you know, Arsenal fans in Nairobi, or victory parades in Uganda, or Man City fan hubs in New York City. How is this happening?
This comes back to that point of whether you're born into something, whether, you know, the traditional fan was born into their, you know, their community, the team that they'd follow. They sort of follow who their dad or family would go into. Now, fandom evolves from many different places, particularly when you're supporting a team for different. It's, you know, the internet and globalization has enabled that. The NFL, you know, to use them as an example with their international expansion, has done an amazing job, and they've left no stone unturned in doing, you know, the local, not only local events in Spain and England, and they're going to go to the Middle East and do all this stuff, but the community building, the sort of the creator ecosystem that they put in place in all these different areas, and the fans are buying into it in their own way. They're not the same as the US NFL fans. You go to an NFL game in London, and everyone's wearing different jerseys. Like they're not there to support one team or another. Some of them might be, but they're just there because it's a game, and because it's a bit like going to a concert. So they're just going to be entertained. And so I think that some of it is organic. Maybe some football fandom in Africa has come from a very organic place, but you can also kind of engineer it in ways that you were never able to before.
Yeah, definitely. And it's obviously with the internet, it's much more visible. And you're talking about the fan parades in Nairobi or wherever. Those are almost becoming cultural moments within football. They're not just talked about by a few people. They'll be talked about by all the ways that football. There's so much football content out there. There's so many people that cover the game in so many different ways. They'll be talking, but they look. That's almost like, and finally, oh, here are the, and it. Do you know what it does do as well, especially in this day and age, when it's at its best, football, and all sport has this. Don't get me wrong, and I can only speak for myself, but when it's at its best, football brings people together, gives you the most incredible feelings wherever you are, whether you're watching that on a TV watching Arsenal win the league in Nairobi on a TV with 13 people, or whether you're at the clock end with your mates. It's just the best thing, and it gives you joy. And again, I think we need more of that in the world in general. So when it's good, it's the best thing in the world, and when it's bad, obviously, when you're a football fan, it's soul destroying. Tell those Arsenal fans who on the other night when we're watching the Champions League final, when the penalties are going in, they're like lowest to the low, but then they remember, oh, we're Premier League champions, we've done this.
But,
So
but you need the bad to have the good.
well, also true. You need that to enjoy that.
In a sense, as a fan, you're enjoying the bad times, even if you don't realize it.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it's part of the
Part of the
pathology.
journey.
Yeah.
And there's that togetherness. Why do fans keep turning up if the teams at bottom of the league and relegated? That walk to the ground, that feeling of togetherness that you don't get from almost anything else is really compelling.
And I think COVID, so you just go back on what COVID did, obviously, when we had the empty stadiums, people missed out on that. All that they missed out on connection across their whole lives, of course. But the one thing at the end of the week that made them happy and made them just distract from all the other things that were going on in their life. And that's one of the best things football is. It's just the best distraction in the world. And I think COVID really made people realize, we've seen the rapid rise in crowds in the lower leagues and non-league in England as well. And the investment, people are getting invested in it because they realized there was a world where nothing was happening. Now, this is one thing that's happening that's amazing. You want to tap into this, and whether that's, fans, whether that's brands, I think COVID did change a lot of things on that aspect.
Do you think that some of the stuff we've been talking about in terms of the big leagues, big teams, and how they're evolving for better or worse into more of this sort of entertainment brands, is that driving people sort of down towards smaller teams and getting more engaged in
I think
the local clubs?
There's definitely a certain section of supporters that are getting turned off for a number of different things, whether it's VAR is obviously a big thing that I hear a lot of people, and at Hampton and Richmond, we've used it in the tagline this year, 3:00, you can have a drink by the side of the pitch, which is obviously you can't do, and no VAR. It's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing, but it does pull people down. But I do think, and again, the way that I think some clubs, we've seen Liverpool once again reverse their higher ticket prices, and I'm just picking that out as an example because the fans really did protest that, and for the third time in however many years, they reversed that decision. So clubs are listening to fans more, but they are still trying to eke out as much as they can from supporters as a rule, which is at odds with those fans who are seeing millions and billions of pounds coming into the game. We're talking about sponsorship. That's fine if we can do sponsorship, but why am I paying an extra £2 if it only gives the club an extra 1.5 million when they can make that, in so many different ways? So I think there is that balance, and it is pushing people down. I'm really interested to see what happens in the World Cup because everyone's talked about the high ticket prices, the high hotel prices, the trains that are usually $15 an hour, $150. I'm really interested to see how that will change what we see and what people will experience on the ground, but also what we see on our televisions, because I know England fans home and away have been going to everywhere and go to every place imaginable that have just gone, do you know what? This is the final straw for me. So it does feel like something's slightly shifting now, which would be a real shame because, again, they are part of that product that have made football so successful.
So let's dig into this idea of bigger isn't always better. Actually, there's some really interesting niche sports. If you can find the right fit as a sponsor, there's some amazing, highly engaged communities who you could partner up with them to do some good stuff. What are some of the niche sports that you think are kind of interesting that sponsors should be looking at, or that you're curious to see how it grows?
I'm going to use trail running as an example. I know we both love the sport. It's still a niche sport. It's going through its own kind of boom at the moment, and becoming slightly more mainstream. Um, and it has an opportunity to attract sponsors and to grow its fan base because for a number of reasons. It's remained a bit of a subculture, so it has its own almost sort of belief system and ethos and its own brands and things like that. It has multiple different formats, so there's these short races that last a day, but it's all about explosive speed and you know huge climbs. And then there's these sort of long multi-day events, and the story arc is completely different. It's about endurance, and it's about the character of some of these athletes. And so inevitably, brands are trying to get in on the act. There's been one example recently where and Adidas have a place. They have a right to win in that market. They make trail shoes and things like that. But they partnered with an endemic trail running brand called Satisfy, which is like a cool brand and a bit of a kind of rebellious brand, I would say. So they put on this event, a joint co-branded event, where they had athletes running around a pub track, like a sort of BMX track type thing, with sort of punk and hardcore music playing, which fitted Satisfy.
Yeah.
But for like the Adidas thing didn't work, and the response was that it was a bit cringe and like, what are Adidas trying to do? Sort of muscling in on this sort of subculture. And so I think like something like trail running is ripe for expansion and ripe for brands to get in on the act. But it comes back to that thing of know your audience, be authentic, like choose carefully. And so, yes, there are pros and cons of doing so, but trail running would be my pick. Yeah.
Good.
I was going to say something else, but what I would recently, so the World's Football Sevens has just finished in London, and it's like the third iteration, I think, now around women's football. And do you know what the thing that struck me the most was probably goes back to what I was saying before, joy, fun, connection, community was all evident in that little bit of West London. But it was also elite level football. We're talking about Chelsea, one of the best teams. The players are bringing their manager, who's like elite level manager and won Champions Leagues. They're carrying it onto the pitch and they're making it fun. That's just a pitch entrance. And then when the football actually starts, the football's really good. It's fast paced. Now, obviously, again, football, in recent times, we've had the Baller League. The Masters League is back again. So there's loads of this small-sided versions of football, which are very interesting. But I do think that the World Football Sevens has cottoned onto something really good. And at the moment, it's just primarily women's football. And I know there's another tournament in America which does men's football as well. But I actually think the fun and the excitement of that really captured my imagination, and it captured my ecosystem on, my football ecosystem on social media, which I think is always another sign. Yeah.
And I imagine that compared to other formats of football, it attracts a different audience or a more diverse audience.
Yeah,
it's got
definitely.
broader appeal.
Yeah. And
it feels more accessible.
Yeah, exactly. And women's football are obviously women's football is having more than a moment. The Lionesses, certainly in this country, the Lionesses, what they've done has been incredible on so many different levels. But they are reaching that point now as well where how do we, they're in that balance, aren't they? Trying to chase and become various things that the men's game is, which then detracts from what makes the women's game special. So there's a real delicate balance between what women's football is trying to do and what the existing fans want and what new fans might want. So I do think the World Football Sevens was a really interesting, this feels fresh and exciting. And I think that, and fun, crucially fun. We need more of that.
That's why we do it.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, I wanted to end on quick fire questions. So, one sentence answers quickly. Niche sports. Let's start with that. What niche sport would you love to see added to the Olympics 2028? It's going to come before we know it. Tom?
I'm going to say trail running again. I think it could be like the Tour de France, the next Tour de France in terms of sort of engagement. So.
And good location outside LA. Yeah.
I'll upset the South Americans amongst this, but I think football at the Olympics isn't. There's too much football as it is, so I think let's just get rid of the main football, but maybe a futsal or make futsal more, or even World Football Sevens, something like that. Something that is fun, fast paced, but also elite and gives football a presence at the Olympics, but without what it is at the moment, which I don't think is worthwhile.
Good stuff. I go for ultimate frisbee. I think
Ah,
that's
well,
Yes, yeah.
very good one.
untapped gem. In your opinion, best sports sponsor of all time, Seb?
Can I be really niche? I'm a Yeovil Town fan. When I was a kid, we had Bass, the big red logo on the front of our shirts for about 5 or 6 years. It's stuck with me ever since. And if I ever see a Bass logo, I'm going to, I take a picture of it and go, oh, do you remember this X, Y, Z? So that's very niche. But I think I'll probably mention them, Sharp, JVC, around that time when sponsorship was not fresh because it had been going for a while. Hitachi was the first main one, but I would say the Sharps and the JVCs, they just strike a chord, and they were on iconic kits and iconic imagery. I can think of the players straight away now, and that's probably what you want as a sponsor, isn't it? To remember them in the moment, and that's I would say that.
Best
I mean,
sponsor?
I think Red Bull has said is best practice, and I think Nike, despite its troubles in the operationally in public markets at the moment, I think has done such a good job of over the years telling great stories and feeling really part of the fabric of sports and some iconic moments as well. The Nike World Cup adverts, which have just sort of burnt into our memories. So yeah, I'll go with that.
Good. Best fans? Which sports team has the best fans in the world?
Oh, this is dangerous because I don't want people in my social media comments, but I think England fans get a lot of stick and have had a lot of stick historically, and we know the reasons why that, and some of that is justified. But I've been to tournaments in recent years with England fans, and there's something really special about that group of fans and fun, excitement, and I don't know. It's the home of football, so to speak. Football's coming home. It never does seem to come home. Maybe it will do this summer, but I think England fans get a lot of bad reputation, and I think actually I've experienced some of the best times of my life watching England.
I had the pleasure of watching almost an entire World Cup in Brazil once. It was the Germany World Cup, but I happened to be over there, and I would say they're the best fans.
German fans.
Brazilian fans.
Brazilian fans.
I mean, they just everything became a party, and it was they like a party anyway. But the being there for the World Cup was something special in terms of how much they live and breathe it, and the passion and the respect and admiration they have for flamboyant players. No matter where the other players are from, I just think they have a real love for the game.
Great. I'm going to give a shout out to the Japanese fans, the Japan fans.
Oh yeah,
for the sheer fact that they clean up the stadium
Very,
afterwards.
very, very good.
Like what they did for the game there, fantastic.
yeah, very. I've never gone to a J League game, and I've really wanted to, and we covered it quite a few times in Mundial, and the level of, again, talking to tifos and displays, they are next level and passionate and very coordinated in their singing as well. So yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Okay, I talked about novelty earlier. Sports is always changing. New rules, new formats. If you could add one outrageous or insane sports rule innovation, what would you do?
I'm going to upset the goalkeepers here, but I think if a goalkeeper gets sent off, then an outfield player should have to go in goal. I think I grew up on a time when sub keepers weren't even a thing, and yes, I realise I'm putting reserve keepers out of a job here, or backup keepers out of a job, but it was a lot of fun. I saw a video of Vinnie Jones playing in goal for Wimbledon the other day, and it's amazing when they do really well. So that would be my rule change in football. But yeah, apologies to the keepers.
That's right up there with when the wicketkeeper comes up to bowl. Just
Yeah.
very occasionally he takes the gloves off and has a go.
Everyone loves it, and it was exciting and fun, and but I don't think that will happen. I think the goalkeepers union will be up.
Sounds good
about
though.
that.
Worth a try. Tom?
I've let the team down here. I don't have one, but on your advice, I did do some research on it this morning, and the first thing I saw on Reddit was someone suggesting that water polo should be played in salt water and throw in a shark into the next. So I thought I'd just stop reading after that. That was it. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Great discussion. I think there's so much that interests us about sports. It's something that probably connects most people who are watching this. So I appreciate your time and looking forward to the World Cup.
Likewise. Yeah, very much so. Thank you.